Hey everyone, today we are going to talk about knits. When we're referring to knits, we're referring to the way that the fabric is made. There's 3 different ways that you can like make fabric or weave it together. So there's woven fabrics, which think of like a loom where you weave fabrics. You are actually weaving the threads together. And that's how we come up with non-stretch fabrics. So like cottons and polyesters and different things that are woven together. And then we have knits, and knits are stretchy fabrics. They are knitted, think of like knitting needles. That's how knits are made, pretty much. So just with different, obviously they're not sitting there with big old knitting needles, but anyway, so knit fabrics are knitted together. They're looped. The fibers are actually looped. And so that gives the fabric some stretch. And then there's non-woven fabrics, which are like suedes and different microfibers like that, which we're not going to get into right now. But now when we talk about like the actual fibers, that's like cotton, polyester, rayon. Those are all fibers. So you can have a cotton that is stretchy or a knit, and you can have cotton that's woven. The fiber content doesn't determine the weave, the way that the fabric is made. So on your bolt, when you're buying fabric, you will see that it tells you what kind of fabric it is. There's lots and lots of different kinds of knits. There's interlocks, there's jerseys, there's lots and lots of different knits that you can work with. So right here, it's going to tell you like what it is. It's a spring knit print. It's, and then it kind of gives a description, and it also tells you your fiber content. This is a rayon spandex. So it has both rayon and spandex in it, and it's knitted together. It will also tell you, your bolt will also tell you how to treat your fabric. Machine wash, gentle, cold, non-chlorine bleach, whatever. So always pre-wash your fabrics, especially if there's a high cotton content, because cotton shrinks. So I always pre-wash my fabric first. Now when you're sewing on knits, you're going to sew a little bit differently, and you're going to use different patterns. Patterns are made different for knits because knits stretch, and so the patterns therefore are made like smaller, because otherwise you're going to have big, loose, baggy dresses or whatever you're making. So the patterns are different. If you're using knits, you want to make sure that you choose a pattern that specifically says for knits. When you are sewing knits, there's 2 ways that you can do that. One is on an overlock or serger, which is the best way to sew on knits. But I realize a lot of people don't have those machines, and so I'm going to teach you today how to sew knits on a traditional sewing machine. Okay, so to start with, you are going to want a different needle when you are sewing with knits. You can try a universal needle, but you're supposed to really use a ballpoint needle. This is what a ballpoint needle, it might be called ballpoint. You can also use jersey. The tip of the needle is different, and so it pierces the fabric differently, and so that's why you want a ballpoint needle. I'm going to be honest with you, we've had some struggles with using the ballpoint needles on machines for some reason with my students. I'm not really sure why, and so sometimes we've had to go back to using the universal needles because it's not like working right with their machine, and I'm not really sure why. I thought maybe it was just like me, user error, but I kind of reached out to some other colleagues like in the sewing field, and it seemed, actually I even did a poll, and like 75% of people said that they struggle with the needle. What happens is a lot of times it's skipping stitches, and I don't know why. So I want you to try with a ballpoint or a jersey needle. The lower the number, the lighter the fabric. The bigger the number, the heavier the fabric. So if you're using like a medium weight knit fabric, then probably get like a size 9 or 11 needle. If you're using like a heavy knit, which you probably won't, but then you could get like a bigger number. So it might say 9 or 65, or it could say like 11 and another number there. But so try out your ballpoint first, and hopefully you won't have any skip stitches. But if you do, then just try with your universal and you should be okay. So now we can't sew on knits with just a regular straight stitch, because what's going to happen is your fabric is going to stretch and your stitch is not going to stretch, and so your stitch is going to break. So what you need to do is you need to set up your machine. Let me change that in a minute. I changed it to a zigzag stitch. So when you're sewing with knits on a regular machine, you want it to be on zigzag. We don't want it to be a big zigzag. We want it to be very subtle, but just enough to give us a little bit of stretch. So change your setting to a zigzag stitch and put your width between 0 and 1. That's what I found to be best. It gives it just a teeny tiny little bit of a zigzag, enough so that when your fabric stretches, your stitch stretches with it. And then your length, you can leave at your normal length, somewhere between 2 and 3. Always, always, always test this out on scrap fabrics before you start sewing your clothes or your pattern. Okay, so I'm going to just fold this in half and I'm going to show you. I have my tension. You may have to play around with your tension also. Sometimes you need to tighten it up a little bit for knits. Normally I have it here between 3 and 5. Earlier I had it tightened to 6, so I'm going to make sure that it works there at 6. But I'm just going to run this through and I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm following my seam allowance, and yes, you can still back stitch. So you're just going to run your stitch down. Back stitch at the end. And it looks beautiful. Perfect. As you can see, if you look really closely here, you can see that it's kind of a little bit, the stitches aren't exactly straight. They're just a little bit zigzag there. And that just allows it to stretch without ripping your stitch. And the other side, same thing. So that actually looks a tiny bit loose. I could probably tighten up my tension just a little bit. You don't want your stitches to be loose or coming up, so you can tighten it a little. I'll do one more. So like I said, if you notice that it's skipping stitches, and I don't have a sample really to show you because my machine is cooperating beautifully with me today, but sometimes you might see where there's like longer stitches in there, and that means that it's skipping stitches. And hopefully that doesn't happen. If it does, then try with your universal needle and see how that works for you. But hopefully you won't have any problems with the ballpoint. It seems to be working nice today. You will just have to play around with your tension a little bit more. Make it a little bit tighter, and that should help things out. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. You pretty much just follow your same rules of sewing. It's just you have to change your settings. So make sure when you're sewing on knits that you're sewing with a zigzag. And if you have any questions, then just drop me a line and I will be sure to answer as soon as I can see it. One more quick note is when you are finishing doing hems, you will be using a different stitch. You won't be doing like your normal hem. And so I'm going to make a separate video for you to see how to do a hem on knits. So make sure to check that video also on my YouTube. If you want more videos learning how to sew or finding projects or whatever, then hit the like or subscribe button, and I will see you soon. Bye.